Hello, everybody. Mrs. Kipp from Syracuse Academy of Science and Citizenship back again with another fairy tale. So far, we have read Rapunzel, Sleeping Beauty, The Frog Prince, and Rumpelstiltskin. Today, we are going to read Hansel and Gretel Part 1. This is a longer story, so it's going to be 2 different days. And our objectives for today are to demonstrate familiarity with the fairy tale Hansel and Gretel, identify the fairy tale elements of Hansel and Gretel, and identify fairy tales as a type of fiction. So some of us might have heard this story before, some of us maybe not, or maybe this one will be a little different than the version we've already heard. Let's find out. Here's our first picture. Once upon a time, near a deep, dark forest, there lived a poor woodcutter with his wife and 2 children. The boy was named Hansel, and the girl was named Gretel. The family never had very much to eat, and now, when times were hard, people around the land were starving, and the poor woodcutter could not get enough food to feed his family. As he lay in bed one night, tossing and turning with worry, he turned to his wife and said, "What is going to happen to us? How can we feed our poor children when we haven't got enough for ourselves?" "Listen to me," said his wife. "Early tomorrow morning," the cold-hearted or unkind woman said, "we'll take the children deep into the woods. We'll give each of them a piece of bread and make a fire. Then we'll leave them and go about our work. They won't find the way home in time for dinner, and we will eat their share." "No," said the man, "I cannot do that. I cannot leave my children alone in the woods where there are wild animals. It will get dark and cold as the sun sets." "Then you're a fool," snapped the woman. "You might as well accept it that we will all starve." Then she nagged the poor man and scolded him, and kept at him until at last he agreed. "But I feel sorry for my poor children," he said quietly. He should feel bad for his poor children. That's a terrible idea. The 2 children were so hungry that they had not been able to sleep, so they heard everything their stepmother said to their father. Gretel cried, but Hansel whispered, "Don't worry, I will think of something." And when their parents had gone to sleep, Hansel got up, put on his little coat, and sneaked outside. The moon was shining brightly, and the white pebbles that lay in front of the house glittered like silver coins. Hansel stooped and filled the pocket of his coat with as many pebbles as he could hold. Then he tiptoed back to bed and said, "Gretel, go to sleep, little sister." What he's going to do with all of those pebbles. At daybreak, the woman came and woke the 2 children. "Get up, you lazy bones. We're going to the forest to get some wood." She gave them each a piece of bread and said, "That's your food for the day. Don't eat it all at once, because it's all you're going to get. We'll have supper after we return home from the woods. That is, if you are home in time." Psh. Gretel carried both pieces of bread in her apron because Hansel's pockets were full of pebbles. Then he started out on the way to the forest. As they walked, Hansel kept turning and looking back at the house again and again. His father said, "Hansel, what are you looking at? You must watch where you're going." "Oh," said Hansel, "I'm just looking at my little white kitten sitting on the roof of the house to say goodbye." You think that's true? I don't know. The wife said, "You little fool, that's not your kitten. That's just the sun shining on the chimney. Now come along." But Hansel stayed a few steps behind and kept turning, and each time he turned, he dropped a pebble from his pocket to mark the way. Oh, so he's dropping pebbles as they walk, so it'll make a pathway, so we'll be able to find their way back home. That's a good idea. When they were deep in the forest, the father said, "Gather some firewood, children. I'll start a fire so you won't get cold while we work." Hansel and Gretel gathered a little mountain of twigs and sticks, and when the fire was burning, the wife said, "Stay by the fire, you 2. We have to go and cut wood. When we're finished, we'll come back to get you." Are they coming back to get them? No. So Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire. After a time, they ate their bread, and after a longer time, they got so tired that they closed their eyes and fell asleep. When they woke, it was dark, and they were all alone. Gretel began to cry, but Hansel comforted her. "Wait a little bit until the moon rises," he said. So he was comforting her, trying to make her feel better because she was crying. When the full moon had risen, Hansel took his little sister by the hand and followed the pebbles which glittered like silver coins and showed them the way. They walked on through the night, and at last, at the break of day, they came to their father's house. They knocked on the door, and when the woman opened, she was shocked. She was really surprised. But all she said was, "Why, there you are. Why did you stay so long in the forest? We thought you were never coming home." Of course, their father was glad to see them, for it had broken his heart to leave them alone. Well, it should break your heart to leave your kids alone in the woods. Not very long afterward, times were hard again, and there was little food to eat. Again the children heard their stepmother say to their father one night, "There is nothing left but a half loaf of bread. After that we're done. We don't have enough food for ourselves and the children. This time we'll take them so deep in the forest they won't find their way back for a week." "But wife," said the man with a heavy heart, "it would be better to share our last bite of food with the children." But the wife would not listen to him, and she knew if she kept at him, she could get him to give in and agree with her plan, as he did before. He's weak. Much later, when their parents were asleep, Hansel got up to collect pebbles just as he did before, but he couldn't get out. His stepmother had figured out how they found their way home last time and had locked the door. So Hansel got back in bed and tried to think of a different plan. I wonder what his plan is going to be. Early the next morning, the woman roused the children out of bed. She gave them a piece of bread, even smaller than before. As they walked into the woods, Hansel broke up the bread in his pocket, and every once in a while he stopped to throw a crumb on the ground. "Hansel," said his father, "why do you keep stopping and looking back?" "I'm looking at a little pigeon that's sitting on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me," answered Hansel. "I don't think that's true." "Little fool," said the wife, "that's not a pigeon. It's only the sun shining on the chimney." So they walked on, and Hansel dropped breadcrumbs all along the way. What do you think might happen dropping little pieces of bread in the woods? Think maybe an animal might find them and eat them? I don't know. The woman led the children deeper into the forest than they had ever been in all their lives. Again they gathered sticks for a fire, and the woman said, "Sit there, children, and when you're tired, go to sleep. We're going to cut wood, and when we're finished, we'll come get you." Liar. Later, when it was lunchtime, Gretel shared her small piece of bread with Hansel because he had left his in crumbs along the path. Then they fell asleep. As evening came, no one came to get them. When they woke, it was dark, and they were alone. When the moon rose, they started for home, but they could not find the breadcrumbs. The birds had eaten them up. Oh, I was afraid of that. "Come, Gretel," said Hansel. "I know we can find our way." But they couldn't find it. They went on all night and the next day from morning until evening, but they could not find their way out of the forest. They were terribly hungry, for they had nothing to eat but a few berries. When they were so tired that they could barely drag themselves any further, they lay down under a tree to fall asleep. And that's all we get to hear today. So what do you think's going to happen next? Can't find their way home. They're really hungry and they're tired. Now they're lost. What do you think might happen next? I don't know. Well, let's go over some questions, and then we'll find out tomorrow what happens next. All right, number 1. What problems do Hansel and Gretel have in the story? I have quite a few problems in the story. Well, for one, their father and their stepmother keep leaving them in the woods. They have no food to eat, and now they're lost. So they've had problem after problem here. Number 2, why do the woodcutter and his wife plan to leave Hansel and Gretel in the woods? What was their reason for wanting to leave them out in the woods alone? Because they don't have enough food for all 4 of them, and they're afraid, and they're selfish. They're very selfish. Number 3, what does Hansel do when he hears the plan to leave him and Gretel in the woods? At first, when he hears the plan is to leave them out in the woods, he goes out and gathers pebbles to make a pathway for them to be able to find their way home. The second time, the stepmother is on to his plan. So remember, she locked them in their bedroom so he couldn't go out and collect pebbles. So then he dropped the breadcrumbs along the path to try and find their way home, but then the birds ate them, so that didn't work. How would you describe Hansel? What are some words you would use to describe Hansel? I'd say he's clever, he's brave, he's caring. Remember, he tried to comfort his sister. He's trying to save his sister. He's trying really hard to do the right thing when his dad and his stepmom are trying to leave him in the woods. All right. An important vocabulary lesson from today's story was the word comforted. In the read aloud, you heard Gretel began to cry, but Hansel comforted her. Say the word comforted with me. Comforted. If you've ever been comforted, someone has tried to make you feel better when you were sad or upset. My mother comforted me when my best friend moved away. I have a few questions for you. Have you ever been comforted by a friend? I have been comforted by a friend when I was sad. I had a friend that tried to help me feel better, for sure. Have you ever comforted a friend? I think most of us probably have. When we see our friends upset, we do what we can to try and make them feel better. Have you ever been comforted by someone in your family? Yeah, when you're upset, mom or dad, grandma, grandpa, brother, sister, aunt, uncle. I'm sure somebody's given you a hug and tried to help you feel better. Last one, have you ever been comforted by a teacher? It's safe to say my first graders have definitely been comforted by me, and a lot of times they have comforted me when I was upset or sad about something. All right, that's it for today. Tomorrow we get to hear what happens next to poor Hansel and Gretel that are lost and starving in the woods now. And I can't wait. I will see you tomorrow. Have a good night. Bye.